Hi folks, thanks for tuning in. Let's get right into it then and have a think about philosophy of humour. So the principal book that I'm drawing from for this clip is this one here. It's by Noel Carroll and it's called Humour, a Very Short Introduction. It's a lovely, accessible and concise book that looks at the philosophy of humour. I'll be adding my own comments along the way as well, my own observations. So there are three major theories of humour that are going to be briefly summarised and critiqued. These are the superiority theory, the release theory, and the incongruity theory. If there's a prevailing argument in this clip, it's that humour isn't tidy, it's a broad and somewhat messy human phenomenon which can't be explained with a single coverall theory. But we'll look at three of the most influential theories. The first one we're going to look at then is the superiority theory. Now, Thomas Hobbes, an English 17th century philosopher, suggested that humour derives from the pleasure of finding oneself superior to others, along with a kind of contempt for them. So in a sense then, laughter, or just a general feeling of mirth, is a kind of expression of pride. As Hobbes put it, humour arises from what he calls a sudden glory when we recognise our supremacy over others. In what instances would this model feel pertinent today then? It certainly connects back to the tradition of clowns who look intentionally foolish, and there's also the humour of slapstick when others make pratfalls and slip up and crash into things and so on. There's a kind of underlying feeling of superiority to people who do things like that. As far as jokes goes, we can connect the superiority theory back to Irish jokes if you're English, or Polish jokes if you're American. Apparently those from Tajikistan make jokes about those from Uzbekistan. Most cultures seem to do this. The French apparently make jokes about the French-speaking Swiss. Then there's things like blonde jokes as well. All these things are variations of moron jokes, basically. So it's a joke where someone shows their stupidity and we supposedly enjoy our feelings of superiority. We live in an age of increased sensitivity today, so jokes like these aren't as widely shared or enjoyed as they used to be, which is a good thing, of course. The superiority theory also fits with comedians who are misogynistic or ridicule racial minorities. Again, they're not as popular as they used to be. You can still find them, but a few pertinent examples from the 1980s would include Bernard Manning or Roy Chubby Brown if you're British, or Andrew Dice Clay if you're American. Their humour then is considered old-fashioned in the current social climate, though they enjoyed success in their heydays. There are also comedians who don't make fun of minorities, but rather who play the stooge in their own material. So then we, the audience, are invited to feel superior to them. For example, there's Rodney Dangerfield, who would come up with lines like, "I looked up the family tree and found out I'm the sap." Or Woody Allen, early in his career when he was still doing stand-up, he said things like, "I don't think my parents liked me, they put a live teddy bear in my crib." As far as critiquing the superiority theory goes, we can point out that there are plenty of examples of humour where this model doesn't work. A feeling of superiority isn't always a necessary condition when you're trying to make someone laugh. Consider the following joke. A horse walks into a bar, the barman says, "Why the long face?" Right? There's no superiority there, it's just a pun. Young infants also laugh at peekaboo games, so there's no superiority there, or even a sense of self to feel superior to. So evidently then, superiority isn't always in action when we experience a feeling of mirth or if we laugh at something. And thinking about the origin of this theory then, we can ask what was humour like when Thomas Hobbes first developed his superiority theory in the 17th century. It may have been more apt in his time than it is today, even if we can find modern day examples where it seems to fit. A plausible proposition could be that superiority can be layered into the mix, so to speak, as part of the appeal for some jokes with the appropriate audience, as in the case of the racist jokes. The second theory then is called the release theory. The 19th century English philosopher Herbert Spencer, along with the influential psychologist Sigmund Freud, both advanced comparable ideas that can be termed the release theory of humour, or sometimes known as the relief theory. In essence, a release theory suggests that laughter is a liberation of repressed or pent-up energy, a release, if you like, of our constrained spirits. This theory suggests that laughter is a mechanism by which psychological tension is reduced. So humour may, for example, serve to facilitate relief of the tension caused by one's fears. Laughter, or just the general feeling of mirth, can result from a release of nervous energy then. This theory does a better job at explaining why toddlers enjoy peekaboo as much as they do. There's a build-up of tension and then peekaboo, right? Then they laugh. Humour, according to the relief theory, is not just used for peekaboo, but mainly to overcome socio-cultural inhibitions and also reveal suppressed desires. As far as socio-cultural inhibitions go, this feels relevant to comedians who break taboos, such as Richard Pryor, Sarah Silverman, or Frankie Boyle, along with many, many more. They confront potentially offensive topics head-on, and we, the audience, enjoy a feeling of release by hearing them say the unsayable, so to speak. A similar principle applies to satirical comedians like Mort Sahl or Lenny Bruce, for a couple of earlier examples, or Lewis Black and Trevor Noah for two more recent examples. A widespread feeling of dissatisfaction with the political climate is given a voice through these comedians, and it feels as though our weight is being lifted by hearing someone express our dissatisfactions. Herbert Spencer then, remember the guy who first coined this theory, suggests that laughter is an economical phenomenon whose function is to release a kind of psychic energy that had been wrongly mobilized by incorrect or false expectations. This theory proposes what you can call a kind of hydraulic view of the mind, where mental energy hits a blockage and seeks an outlet as the pressure builds. Noel Carroll suggests that this is a somewhat dubious metaphor for how the mind works from the vantage point of the present day. Nonetheless, it does feel clear that giving voice to things that are generally considered taboo does seem to play an important part in the role of humour. Even if breaking taboos alone isn't enough for something to be funny. Remember, sometimes seeing someone break a taboo can just be embarrassing without being funny, and hearing someone speak about political problems isn't always necessarily funny. So perhaps there needs to be another theory of humour layered into the mix, even if the release theory does tell part of the story. This then finally leads us to the incongruity theory. To date then, this theory has attracted the most followers among philosophers and psychologists. In the 18th century, the limitations of the superiority theory, remember the first one I was talking about, were noted by the Irish-Scottish philosopher Francis Hutchinson, who suggested that the object of comic amusement is not perceived superiority, but rather incongruity. Here, what is key to comic amusement is a subversion of the ways in which we think things operate. In other words, we make assumptions about how things are or how they're going to be, and this view is then disturbed when our expectations are violated. Consider the following joke by Henny Youngman. I told the doctor I broke my leg in 2 places. He told me to quit going to those places. Here then, expectations are subverted because we assume that there were 2 places on his leg that were broken. Thus, there is an incongruity which elicits a kind of comic amusement. We're wrong-footed, basically. So, subverting or disrupting our expectations seems like a good insight on what makes something humorous. Though we can also make the provision that incongruity alone isn't enough to make something funny. For example, Salvador Dali's paintings are often incongruous. You see elephants with what looks like giant spider legs, or melting clocks. These are incongruous images. They're striking, but they don't make me laugh or provoke a feeling of mirth particularly. So evidently, again then, incongruity alone isn't enough to elicit mirth or laughter, but you can still say that it's part of the mix. Another issue with the incongruity theory is that incongruity is a loose term, so parameters need to be established. From here, we can ask the following questions. First, can we make it clearer what we mean by incongruity by offering a list of examples? 2, does incongruity take a variety of forms, or is it consistent? Is it always the same kind of incongruity? 3, what is the difference between humorous and non-humorous incongruities, like the Dali paintings? 4th, why does the perception of incongruity elicit pleasure, and in what instances is incongruity confusing or irritating, and why? These are good questions, but not easy to answer, and I won't be able to answer them all in this clip, but I can offer a few humorous incongruities by quoting a series of one-liner gags by popular comedians. Take the following line from the comedian Stephen Wright. The other day when I was walking through the woods, I saw a rabbit standing in front of a candle making shadows of people on the tree. This line's incongruous for a couple of reasons. First, because it anthropomorphizes rabbits, it gives them human traits. Secondly, it reverses the familiar scenario of humans making rabbits with their hands, so there's a kind of incongruity in the reversal that it plays. Here's another incongruity by comedian Henning Youngman. When I read about the evils of drinking, I gave up reading. So here then, expectations are subverted because a familiar phrase is being reversed. You can also subvert expectations and create an incongruity by using language in an unusual way. This is a line from Groucho Marx. One morning I shot an elephant in my pyjamas. How he got into my pyjamas I'll never know. This is an incongruous use of language then. I'll mention it's not a pun, it's called a dangling modifier. You can also reinterpret words and play the stooge, as in the case of Rodney Dangerfield again, who said, I said to the barman, surprise me, he showed me a naked picture of my wife. Okay, so that's it for today then. We've looked at several examples of an incongruous use of language. Just to reiterate what I said at the beginning, we can say that humour isn't tidy, is broad, and it can take a variety of forms. But all these theories so far, superiority, release, and incongruity, seem to describe some aspect of humour, and they can work together in shedding insight on what this human activity of humour is. What we can say is that when something is humorous, several forces seem to be at play simultaneously, which work together to create the overall effect. Okay, and that's it. So thanks a lot for watching. Feel free to leave a like, a comment and subscribe, and I'll leave a relevant link in the clip description below. Okay, bye for now.